Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today, we are taking a historical detour into one of the most beloved and I think certainly most complicated origin stories in the entire Harry Potter universe. We are rewinding the clock almost 2 decades before Harry Potter was even born to examine the 4 figures whose lives and deaths really shaped the destiny of the wizarding world, the Marauders.
That's right. I mean, when you look at James Potter, Sirius Black, Remus Lupin, and Peter Pettigrew, they start as the epitome of, teenage friendship and rebellion.
Yeah.
But they quickly become this tangled, tragic web of devotion, devastating betrayal, and the profound, enduring consequences of war and prejudice.
And we're not just reciting names here. We're diving into the dense lore that truly defines them. We have some incredible source material that takes us way beyond the fun-loving friends who created the map.
Exactly.
Our mission today is to understand their true character arcs, the crushing stigmas they face, and the chilling, detailed rationale behind Peter Pettigrew's unforgivable choice.
And that deep dive will dissect Remus Lupin's struggle as an intentional metaphor for a real-world prejudice. We'll analyze the complex, dark side of...
And yes, we'll even look impartially at the evidence for the infamous Wolfstar fan.
We will. We want you to walk away with a richer understanding of friendship, war, and sacrifice.
So to understand the complicated man Remus Lupin becomes, we have to start at the absolute beginning.
Right. With the beautiful moment that came right before the horror. This is Remus's origin story, and it's defined by his father's expertise and one single catastrophic error.
Okay, let's unpack this from the very roots. We start with Lyle Lupin, Remus's father, who was described as a quiet, rather shy wizard, but absolutely brilliant. By the age of 30, he was known as a world-renowned authority on non-human spiritus apparitions.
Which is basically a fancy way of saying boggarts and poltergeists.
Right, creatures that reflect human fear, which is a significant thematic irony given what happens to his son.
It absolutely is. And this expertise is actually how he met Remus's mother, Hope Howell, a beautiful muggle.
How did that happen?
Well, Lyle was chasing an intensely vicious boggart into a dense Welsh forest. Hope, who was this imaginative and sensitive woman, was just out on a walk.
Okay.
Her own overactive imagination, combined with the power of the boggart, caused it to assume the form of her worst fear, a large, predatory-looking man just bearing down on her.
Oh, wow. So she thinks she's actually being attacked.
Exact. But Lyle, hearing her scream, sprints in, and with a single powerful wave of his wand, he banishes the boggart.
And it just shrinks down.
It shrinks down so much. So Hope naturally thought Lyle was this brave man who chased off her attacker. She had no idea about the magic involved.
It's the ultimate meet cute, right?
It really is. And when things got serious, Lyle confessed he was a wizard, and Hope accepted it instantly. She was just thrilled she had never been in any. The sources describe their marriage as a wonderful blend of the magical and the mundane.
And we get that beautiful detail that solidified their romance. When they got married, Hope actually commissioned a boggart-topped cake for their wedding.
I love that detail.
It commemorates the scary yet pivotal moment that brought them together. It really speaks to a family rooted in love, acceptance, and a bit of humor about fear.
But that happiness was tragically short-lived. It was all fractured by Lyle's career.
He moved from studying, harmless non-human spirits to working at the Ministry in the Department of the Regulation and Control of Magical Creatures.
And he did that because of the rising dark climate spurred by Voldemort.
Right. This pivot, though it seems administrative, put him directly in the path of the disaster that defined his son's life.
It introduced him to the profound prejudice of the wizarding world. Werewolves, the sources confirm, were just profoundly shunned by society. They were viewed as less than human.
Which led most of them to live in these self-described marginalized packs, often hiding their identity.
Yeah, and the existing werewolf registry was largely useless because anyone who could possibly hide their condition did so. They knew registration meant permanent social and economic...
And this distrust, this climate, it created the perfect environment for Lyle's catastrophic misstep. He was face-to-face with Fenrir Greyback, who was being questioned about the disappearance and death of 2 Muggle children.
And Greyback was playing the role of a terrified, dirty Muggle tramp.
Yeah. And
the 2 overworked members of the committee, they were completely fooled. They were ready to just release him.
But Lyle wasn't fooled.
No. Lyle, the expert on non-human spiritus apparitions, he recognized the subtle telltale sign. Greyback's intense aggression, the unnatural quietness, and this kind of wolfish gleam in his eyes.
So he speaks up.
He does. He voices his suspicion, recommends they keep Greyback in detention until the next full moon, 24 hours away.
But they mocked him mercilessly. They told him to stick to boggarts.
Which is just so arrogant.
And Lyle, who was generally mild-mannered and academic, became so enraged by their arrogance and dismissal of a clear danger that he delivered the words that became his undoing.
In a fit of temper, he labeled werewolves as soulless evil beings who deserved nothing but death.
And those words, spoken just out of anger, they essentially guaranteed his son's fate.
They did. The committee released Greyback, but before the required memory charm could be cast, Greyback and his accomplices escaped, and they'd overheard Lyle's hateful description.
So Greyback sought immediate revenge on the man who thought he deserved to die.
24 hours later, under the full moon, Fenrir Greyback tracked down the Lupin home and attacked 5-year-old Remus right in his bed. He just smashed through the window.
Wow.
Lyle arrived in time to blast Greyback out of the house with powerful curses, saving Remus's life, but the curse had been cast. Remus was a werewolf, condemned to live under the very prejudices Lyle himself.
The consequence was immediate, painful, and total. The family's life just pivoted entirely to secrecy and fear.
They constantly had to uproot themselves, moving from town to village every time the rumors started about Remus's strange behavior or, his monthly disappearance.
And for Remus, even with loving parents, this meant intense, crushing loneliness. He couldn't play with other children, he couldn't form bonds, all because of the fear that the truth might slip out.
And the lore makes it clear that the physical transformation was becoming unmanageable.
Really?
Yeah. Initially, he could be contained by a locked room and silencing charms, but by the time Remus was 10, he was pounding down doors, smashing windows, and just screaming in excruciating pain as his skeleton reformed.
God, that's brutal. The fear of discovery and the constant need to hide were consuming.
And this leads us to the critical thematic depth. J.K. Rowling herself confirmed that she actively used the character of Remus Lupin and the disease of lycanthropy found metaphor.
Right. For the real world, hysteria and prejudice faced by the LGBTQ+ community during the HIV and AIDS crisis in the 1980s.
Exactly. This is central to his character.
So, when we see Remus's later struggles with self-worth, chronic poverty, and constant fear of exposure, we aren't just reading about a magical curse.
No. We are reading about the profound, real-world bigotry and fear surrounding disease and difference. It imbues his entire character arc with this immediate and painful weight.
Lyle and Hope had basically given up on Remus ever attending Hogwarts. They were just going to educate him at home, believing the risks were too great.
But then, Albus Dumbledore, who knew via his spies among the dark creatures that Greyback had been boasting about his attack, just showed up uninvited to their home.
And Dumbledore, being Dumbledore, provided the solution that changed everything.
He offered Remus the Hogwarts invitation, but with secret arrangements tailored to his condition. That required the Whomping Willow, which was specifically planted and guarded purpose.
And that concealed a tunnel that led directly to the secluded Shrieking Shack in Hogsmeade.
And the transformation was so brutal and noisy that Dumbledore had to ensure the local villagers never suspected the truth. So he happily encouraged the rumor that the Shrieking Shack was violently haunted.
Just to keep the villagers away from the sound of Remus's monthly torment.
And this marked the beginning of Remus's only truly happy the years he spent with the Marauders.
So Remus arrives at Hogwarts, this deeply lonely boy, carrying the weight of his curse and the knowledge that his life was defined by the worst fears of the wizarding world. And almost instantly, he finds the acceptance he never thought possible.
The foundational friendship started quickly and almost accidentally. You have James Potter and Sirius Black, two confident, rebellious, charismatic boys from wealthy, pureblood families.
And they were immediately attracted to Remus's quiet sense of humor and kindness, a quality that balanced their own, let's say, rampant arrogance.
Yes. And then there's Peter Pettigrew.
Right. And this is where the initial imbalance and hierarchy of the group become really apparent.
Remus, whom the sources describe as always the underdog's friend, took pity on
Peter was described as short, rather slow in magic and thought, and a definitive hero worshiper who needed people stronger than himself to protect.
It's highly likely, based on the lore, that without Remus's gentle persuasion and acceptance, James and Sirius would never have bothered.
So they only tolerated him because he was part of Remus's package deal.
I think so. This established a critical dynamic. Peter was there purely due to association and his desperate need for powerful friends.
What's fascinating here is the sheer unwavering loyalty James and Sirius showed when they discovered Remus's condition.
They didn't abandon him.
No, they undertook one of the most incredibly difficult and dangerous magical feats possible, becoming Animagus.
And we need to stress how illegal and difficult. The process takes 3 years, demands perfect concentration, and if you perform it incorrectly, the consequences can be life-threatening.
You could turn yourself into a monster, or worse, permanently merge with your partial animal form.
And legally registering would have exposed Remus, so they risked everything by doing it in illegal.
The sources detail the agonizing requirement. You had to hold a mandrake leash in your mouth for an entire month.
From full moon to full moon.
Right. Then you needed dew collected from a spot that neither sunlight nor human feet had touched for 7 days, and the chrysalis of a death-head hawk moth.
And that's just the start. They had to recite specific incantations at every sunrise and sundown, keeping their wand tip over their heart.
Imagine maintaining that level of meticulous, dangerous dedication as teenagers for 3 straight years.
It's an immense, almost obsessive level of commitment, solely driven by their devotion to their friend.
And Peter, predictably, struggled the most. He was the weakest student, and the sources confirmed that Sirius and James basically had to carry him through the process.
They had to coach him, ensure his potion didn't explode, and keep his concentration focused.
The fact that they dragged him along speaks volumes about their loyalty to the idea of their quartet, if not Peter himself.
Right, and the results became their iconic form. James was Prong, Stag, Sirius was Padfoot, the black dog, and Peter was Wormtail, the rat.
And the reasoning behind the large animal, the stag and dog, was simple yet profoundly loyal.
Werewolves only attack humans.
Exactly. So as large, powerful animals, James and Sirius could control Remus, keep him contained, and crucially, keep him company in the shrieking shack.
Remus later admitted that these periods where his excruciating transformation was accompanied by his 3 closest friends running around with him under the moonlight.
They became the best times of his life.
Yeah. It transformed a period of terrifying self-loathing into one of profound acceptance.
And that intimate knowledge of the school grounds, acquired by roaming freely as animals, naturally led to the creation of the Marauders map.
And we should pause to appreciate the technological magic here. The map showed the entire school, Hogsmeade, all 7 secret passageways, and, chillingly, the real-time moving location of every single person on the grounds.
Noted by their footprints. It's an unparalleled magical artifact, signed by Mooney, Wormtail, Padfoot, and Prongs.
But this incredible loyalty was inextricably linked to complicity and their darkest flaw.
The relentless bullying of Severus Snape.
James and Sirius, particularly, were arrogant, cocky, and saw themselves as untouchable. They used their talent and charisma to hex and humiliate anyone who annoyed them, and Snape was their favorite target.
Which brings us to Remus's ethical blind spot. Dumbledore actually made Remus a prefect, specifically hoping that the position would force him to keep James and Sirius in check.
But Remus admitted he suffered from a faulty conscience. He regretted never standing up to them.
Wait, if Remus was carrying the burden of such severe prejudice, the lycanthropy being a metaphor for a shunned identity, wouldn't he be uniquely positioned to understand the pain of bullying and exclusion?
You think so?
How does the lore reconcile his kindness with his silence?
It explains it through gratitude. Remus felt such profound relief, deep, abiding thanks that James and Sirius hadn't abandoned him over his lycanthropy, something no one else, that he allowed that gratitude to override his ethical.
So he didn't want to jeopardize the only true acceptance he had ever known. He just turned a blind eye.
He placed his personal need for belonging above his moral duty.
And this flawed loyalty culminates in the horrifying Snape incident. Sirius, just bored and cruel, played a horrific trick.
He casually told Snape exactly how to bypass the Whomping Willow and access the Shrieking Shack tunnel while Remus was fully transformed inside.
Snape would have been killed or turned into a werewolf himself.
It was an act of casual malice, but here is where the sources highlight James's conflicting heroism. James, realizing the severity of the danger.
He saves Snape's life at the last possible second, pulls him back from the entrance.
He risked his own safety to prevent murder.
But does saving someone from a prank he and his friends orchestrated truly constitute heroism, or was it just damage?
It's a bit of both. I think the sources weigh it as maturation. It was damage control, yes, but born from a flash of self. It was the first time James used his talent, not for show, but for genuinely self.
And crucially, the sources note that this act was the definitive turning point that started to shift Lily Evans's perception of James.
Right. She saw a sliver of bravery and selflessness that contrasted sharply with his habitual arrogance. It wasn't the end of his journey, but it was the start of the man Lily would eventually marry.
That structural weakness within the Marauders, the flawed loyalty and the unequal hierarchy, was brutally exposed by the pressures of the First Wizarding War. We move now from complicated loyalty to the absolute core of the tragedy, Peter Pettigrew, a character defined by his profound need for protection.
Peter's entire existence was rooted in perpetual, paralyzing fear. He was genuinely an unremarkable student who understood early on that he lacked the magical power, the charisma, or the intelligence to survive alone.
He needed people stronger than him to be his shield.
And that speaks volumes about his sorting. The sources detail that Peter was a hat stall.
A hat stall?
Yeah, the sorting hat deliberated for over 5 minutes, torn between Gryffindor, which suggests a faint ember of bravery and the potential for choice, and Slytherin, which points towards self-preservation and a pragmatic focus on power.
And the hat chose Gryffindor, maybe seeing that sliver of potential bravery.
But his Animagus form, the rat, only makes sense in retrospective irony. Small, hidden, opportunistic. He literally was, as Sirius later bitterly observed, a rat who ratted out his best friend.
So when the prophecy concerning Harry came to light, James and Lily were instantly a prime target for Voldemort. They went into deep hiding, using one of the most complex pieces of protective magic available.
The Fidelius Charm. And we need to pause here to ensure we understand the technical magnitude.
It's vital. The Fidelius Charm is not just a shield. It's a profound, complex piece of secret magic.
It involves taking an entire secret, in this case, the location of James and Lily's home, and hiding it entirely within the soul of one single living person.
And the mechanism of protection is absolute. If the secret keeper does not divulge the location, it is literally impossible for anyone, even Voldemort himself, to find the hidden people or place.
You could stand directly outside the house and not perceive its existence unless the secret keeper tells you.
Initially, James and Lily chose Sirius, their best man, Harry's godfather. He was the obvious choice.
Fiercely loyal and courageous. But here is the critical pivot point of the entire tragedy. Sirius convinced them to switch the secret keeper role to Peter.
And the motivation, as we learn, was this lethal blend of brilliance and arrogance. Sirius thought he was being clever.
He reasoned that nobody, least of all Voldemort, would ever suspect Peter. A weak, unassuming person would be the ultimate decoy, protecting the true secret and ensuring Sirius could act as a more obvious target for Voldemort's.
Only 4 people knew the truth of this switch: Jane, Lily, Sirius.
And Peter's defining characteristic, his need for the strongest protector, guided his final
He looked at James, Sirius, and Remus and decided they were no longer the strongest party. Voldemort was gaining strength and offered the most powerful.
So he sought out Voldemort and became an official Death Eater, branded with the dark. He gave Voldemort the exact, precise location, thus shattering the Fidelius Charm.
And the sources paint this poignant picture. Peter even visited James and Lily just days before the betrayal.
Lily, completely unsuspecting, thought Peter looked sad because of the recent death of fellow Order members and offered him comfort. She never suspected the real reason was just overwhelming, paralyzing guilt.
After Voldemort's downfall that night, Peter immediately realized his predicament.
His chosen protector, Voldemort, was gone,
which left him vulnerable to surviving Death Eaters who might suspect he double-crossed them. He had to vanish, and his vanishing act was an act of sheer desperation and horrific brilliance.
Sirius, realizing Peter was the traitor and had engineered the entire disaster, tracked him down and cornered him in a public street full of muggles.
And Peter, facing immediate capture or death, stages his own death with meticulous detail.
He first cried out, "Lily and James Sirius, how could you?"
making it seem to the muggles and any potential ministry observers that Sirius was the real traitor.
Then, using a powerful blasting spell, he caused an insane explosion that ripped up the street, killed 12 muggle bystanders, and left a massive crater.
And the crowning, chilling detail was the evidence he left behind. Peter had the presence of mind to cut off his own finger.
Yes, he left it there along with his bloody robes and wand, and escaped immediately using his illegal Animagus form, the rat.
This specific act was the key to his perfect deception. The severed finger and the carnage left behind proved destruction beyond doubt.
The ministry instantly concluded that Sirius had committed mass murder and that Peter was the brave but tragically short-lived friend who had confronted him and was blown to...
leaving only a fragment of evidence behind.
Peter Pettigrew was posthumously hailed as a hero who died a hero's death, and was awarded the Order of Merlin First Class, the highest honor the wizarding world offers.
And Peter's devastated mother was presented with his severed finger in a box, a cruel, cold comfort for a lie built on the death of 12 innocent muggles.
He then used his status as an unregistered Animagus to hide in plain sight for 12 years. He chose the Weasley,
a pureblood family, but also known blood traitor, so he'd be in the know.
Exact. He knew they were deeply entrenched in the wizarding world and would keep him updated on news of Voldemort or, gruffily, news of Sirius Black. He became Scabbers.
And he lived a ridiculously leisurely, fat life as a pet rat for over a decade.
His downfall only began when Sirius Black, having slowly regained his sanity in Azkaban, saw a picture of the Weasleys in the Daily Prophet celebrating in Egypt.
And he spotted Scabbers sitting on Ron's shoulder.
It was a single detail that gave him away. Scabbers was missing a toe exactly where Peter had cut off his finger.
That was the irrefutable evidence that Peter was alive, and it spurred Sirius's legendary escape from Azkaban.
the first known escapee at the time. And that began the events that led to the dramatic Shrieking Shack read.
The ultimate climax in the Shrieking Shack exposed the entire truth to Harry, Ron, and Hermione. Sirius and Remus, reunited in their purpose, were ready to kill Peter instantly.
They were just driven by rage and grief.
But Harry intervened, stopping. And this is a pivotal moment for Harry's character development. He argued that his father wouldn't want his two best friends to become killers,
sacrificing their souls for revenge. He insisted that Peter must be handed over to the Dementors, ensuring the Ministry knew the truth.
That act of mercy, sparing Peter's life, created a magical concept known as a life debt.
A profound magical obligation. Dumbledore later stressed that Peter owed Harry his life, and that even the dark arts could not safely transgress such.
Peter returned and found him hiding, weak.
He tortured Bertha Jorkins for information and eventually provided the ult, sacrificing his hand in the graveyard rich for Voldemort.
As a reward, Voldemort gifted him a new, powerful silver hand, commanding, "May your loyalty never waver again, Wormtail."
The hand was a symbol of his renewed allegiance, but it was also a cold reminder of the magical debt.
And that debt was eventually paid years later.
Peter was guarding Harry and Ron, and Harry managed to wrest Peter's wand away. The silver hand, given by his master, grabbed Harry by the throat, strangling.
And Harry, choking and desperate, reminded him, "You owe me, Wormtail."
That phrase triggered the ancient magical debt. Peter hesitated. That brief, fractional moment of wavering loyalty, his small, watery eyes widening in fear and surprise as he slightly loosened his grip.
That was his final, small act of contact.
And it was fatal. That hesitation caused the silver hand to immediately turn on him, obeying its master's command, "May your loyalty never waver," by punishing the disloyal thought.
It moved to Peter's own throat and strangled him to death.
The sources suggest there was a small sliver of remorse in that final moment, fulfilling the faint promise the Sorting Hat saw, but it came far, far.
The betrayal of Peter cast such a long, dark shadow over the remaining Marauders. So now we look at the immense ultimate cost, starting with the sacrifice of James and Lily and the resulting isolation of Remus.
James and Lily's romantic trajectory was deeply rooted in James's maturation. As the sources confirm, Lily initially despised James for his arrogant, show-off behavior and relentless bullying.
But James grew up dramatically in his final years at Hogwarts. He stopped hexing people for fun, was made head boy alongside head girl Lily,
despite never being a prefect, which is a sign of Dumbledore's faith in his capacity for change.
And by their 7th year, their shared responsibility had blossomed into deep love.
They married young at 18, driven by the urgency of the war. They used James's inherited fortune. His parents had tragically died of dragonpox shortly after the wedding to support the order, and they had Harry.
And we get that poignant anecdote of Lily attempting to mend the massive rift with her sister Petunia by sending her the birth announcement for Harry,
which Petunia promptly threw away, choosing her resentment over family.
Their end at Godric's Hollow on Halloween night highlights James's final, selfless evolution. He was wandless.
He'd set his wand onto the couch for a moment while playing with Harry.
He screamed at Lily to take Harry and run while he attempted to hold off the most powerful dark wizard alive. A sacrificial but ultimately futile attempt.
He was struck down instant. Lily then locked herself in Harry's room, barricading the door. Equally wandless, but desperate.
And her sacrifice was the definitive moment of the war. She stood between Voldemort and Harry, pleading for her life to be taken.
And this was a wandless act of supreme ancient magic, protection of love. When Voldemort killed her, he unwittingly triggered this powerful enchantment that shielded.
Right. The sources are clear on the mechanism. Lily's sacrifice created a protection so powerful that when Voldemort's killing curse rebounded, it destroyed him while leaving Harry with nothing but a scar.
This powerful act of love, born of desperation and courage, was the key to the war's end.
And the immediate aftermath left Remus Lupin completely and utterly devastated. He was away on order business in the north.
James and Lily murdered. Peter supposedly murdered, and Sirius imprisoned as a traitor and mass murderer.
He had lost his entire support network in 24 hours.
The compounded grief was crippling. His mother, Hope, died soon after. And while his father, Lyle, remained a loving presence, Remus refused to live with him.
Why?
Because he knew that the prejudices Lyle himself had once voiced still held true in the community. Remus didn't want to endanger his father's fragile peace security. He chose self-isolation.
This returned Remus to the core struggle of the lycanthropy metaphor, extreme isolation and poverty. He lived hand-to-mouth for over a decade.
He couldn't even risk working in the magical world. He often took low-paying, highly transient muggle jobs, manual labor or shop work, where he could disappear monthly without background checks or having to explain his odd absence.
And this chronic instability and the constant fear of exposure, the stigma of his condition, just fueled his self-loathing.
His poverty meant that when the miraculous breakthrough of the Wolfsbane potion was announced, he couldn't afford it.
The Wolfsbane potion was revolutionary but complex and incredibly. It didn't cure lycanthropy, but it allowed the werewolf to retain their human consciousness during the transformation,
turning them into an ordinary sleepy wolf instead of a dangerous mind. Without that potion, the monthly transformations remained agonizing.
Once again, Dumbledore intervened.
He recognized Remus's desperation and talent. He tracked Remus down to a rundown cottage and offered him the defense against the dark arts post at Hogwarts,
which would ensure he would have a limitless, perfectly brewed supply of wolfsbane potion.
Courtesy, ironically, of his old rival, Severus Snape, who had now become potion.
His return was a brief, painful period of happiness. He was reunited with Harry, who was the spitting image of James, and he found purpose teaching.
But the roller coaster of emotion was intense. He was plunged into the shocking truth shack. Sirius was innocent. Peter was the traitor.
And his joy at Sirius's return was quickly overshadowed by tragedy. In his haste and excitement during the confrontation, he forgot to take his wolfsbane potion.
He transformed, allowing Peter to escape. The single mistake that ensured Sirius's name remained uncleared and his life as a fugitive.
And the prejudice loop closed quick. His tenure was short-lived.
Snape, petty and resentful of a marauder teaching at Hogwarts, deliberately let slip to his class that Remus was a werewolf.
Dumbledore received hundreds of angry letters from parents expressing outrage that a dangerous beast was teaching their children.
So Remus had no choice but to resign. He lost his stable employment, his access to the potion, and his place of belonging. He was back to self-isolation, constantly having...
which only reinforced his feeling of being unclean and unwanted by the greater wizarding world.
The final, crushing tragedy came with Sirius's death.
Remus, having just regained his best friend, was utterly devastated at losing the last remaining link to his youth and identity.
And he was forced to embody the burden of strength for the boy who had already lost so much. We have to pause on that.
When Bellatrix Lestrange killed Sirius,
Remus, in his utter grief, had to physically hold back a screaming, enraged Harry from charging after Sirius through the veil. He couldn't grieve. He had to focus entirely on preventing Harry from making a fatal mistake, taking on the psychological toll of that final, devastating loss.
That brings us to a highly discussed and speculated segment, the question of love and partnership in Remus's life, contrasting the canonical relationship with Tonks against the enduring fan theory of Wolfstar.
The Sirius Lupin pairing. And we need to analyze this impartially, using the sources to provide evidence for both sides.
Okay, so let's start with the pro-Wolfstar. The textual evidence, context, and thematic clues that suggest a deeper romantic connection between Sirius and Remus.
First, Sirius Black was described as incredibly handsome and adored by girls, yet he always ignored.
And the sources are highly critical of the author's attempt to explain this lack of interest.
Right, that Sirius was rebelling against his family's expectations by simply rejecting the women who wanted him. Our source material deemed this the worst writing Rowling has ever had,
implying a narrative sacrifice made specifically to disregard the rumors of Sirius potentially being gay or bisexual, thereby fitting him into a conventionally heterosexual narrative later.
Then we return to Remus's thematic con. Since lycanthropy was openly intended as a metaphor for HIV and AIDS, which caused immense stigma against the LGBTQ+ community in the 1980s.
The idea of a relationship between two marginalized figures, Sirius being a shunned blood traitor and Remus being a werewolf, fits neatly into the structure of societal exclusion.
And there are also specific moments of intense devotion. Remus's reaction to hearing Sirius's name post-Azkaban was dramatic. His briefcase slipped from the desk. He later showed deep admiration, almost like a proud, protective partner, for Sirius having...
And you can look at the difference in his reaction to the two traitors. Despite believing Sirius had betrayed James and Lily, Remus was still intensely unwilling to see him suffer the Dementor's kiss.
He says, "Do you really think anyone's that?"
This contrasts fundamentally with his immediate violent readiness to kill Peter Pettigrew just moments later for the exact same presumed crime. He held Peter in contempt. He held Sirius in profound regard, even when he suspected the worst.
They also exhibited a very clear, almost synchronized dynamic regarding Harry. They often spoke in sync, defended James to Harry with shared, reminiscent smiles, and gave Harry a joint Christmas.
They operated less like distant friends and more like co-parenting figures, trying to honor James's memory.
However, connecting this to the bigger picture, the counter-evidence remains strong. Rowling herself has awkwardly tried to debunk the theory. The critical physical hug in the Shrieking Shack after they're reunited was explicitly described in the book as being like a brother.
So it solidifies the relationship as fraternal in the canonical text.
Exactly. And crucially, the foundation of trust was repeatedly fractured. Both men genuinely suspected the other was a spy within the order of...
Sirius suspected Remus because of his absences and condition. Remus suspected Sirius because of his recklessness. That fundamental lack of trust seriously undercuts the intimacy level expected of romantic partners.
And of course, the most undeniable counterpoint is Remus's canonical relationship with Nymphadora Tonks, a fellow Order member,
This relationship is a stark contrast to the speculation. and it's defined entirely by Remus's battle against his own self-hatred.
Right. Linking back directly to the stigma metaphor we discussed earlier, he fell for Tonks, but he saw himself as unclean and unworthy due to his lycanthropy.
He was terrified of condemning her to the same life his mother, Hope, endured. The constant moving, the financial ability, the secrecy, the danger.
When she admitted her feelings, he confessed to feeling a moment of intense happiness immediately extinguished by a sense of crushing duty. He fled from her.
He volunteered for the most dangerous missions and even bitterly commented that Sirius, who he thought always got the women, must have also attracted Tonks, despite knowing they were cousins.
The turning point was inspired by another couple, Fleur Delacour's unwavering love for Bill Weasley, even after Bill was brutally mauled by Fenrir Greyback.
Fleur's determination convinced Tonks that Remus's fear of the curse was irrelevant to her devotion.
That inspiration forced Tonks to make a brave public announcement of her feeling, forcing Remus to finally admit the strength of his own love. They married quickly and quietly in Scotland, but his internal conflict far.
The final, darkest moment of Remus's character arc came when Tonks pregnant. His terror resurfaced with it.
He was convinced he had passed the condition on. He believed he had condemned his wife and unborn child to a painful, dangerous life.
Driven by this self-recrimination, Remus fled his pregnancy. In a moment of absolute cowardice and remorse, he sought adventure with Harry, Ron.
He was trying to join their search for Horcruxes to escape the responsibility he felt unfit to bear.
And this is where Harry, the student, taught the master a profound lesson. Harry, just 17 and carrying his own immense burden, declined Remus's offer and became intensely angry. He called Remus selfish and a coward.
He compared Remus negatively to James, who sacrificed everything for his family, and to Remus's own parents, Lyle and Hope, who sacrificed their peace and security to keep their...
Harry essentially called Remus out for abandoning his family due to self-pity and fear, falling victim to the very prejudice he was trying to avoid.
It was Remus's ultimate wake-up call. He stormed out violently, seeking refuge at the leaky cauldron to drink and fume, but after a few hours of reflection, he was forced to accept that his ex-people had taught him a painful but valuable lesson about true bravery.
He returned, begged for Tonks' forgiveness, and for the remainder of her pregnancy, he gave up dangerous missions, making his family his absolute first priority.
This repentance completed his journey from self-loathing to self-acceptance, and that decision to embrace love and responsibility set the stage for their final heroic chapter. Their son, Edward Remus Lupin Teddy, was born soon after.
And to the immense relief and delight of both parents, Teddy showed no signs of lycanthropy. Instead, he inherited Tonks's metamorph-magus ability.
And Remus, feeling immense gratitude and complete forgiveness toward Harry for forcing him to confront his cowardice, asked Harry to be Teddy's godfather.
But the war reached its final stage. Both Remus and Tonks returned to Hogwarts for the ultimate battle against Voldemort, leaving Teddy with his grandmother.
They knew they had to fight. If Voldemort won, their family, two notorious members of the Order, a werewolf and a half-blood child, would certainly be eliminated. They fought for the future world they wanted Teddy.
Tragically, this final battle cost them everything. Remus was killed by Antonin Dolohov, one of Voldemort's most sadistic and loyal Death Eaters.
And the sources note that Remus, who had spent months focused on concealment spells and protection rather than active dueling to keep his family safe, was weakened and too slow to react against Dolohov's battle-hardened skill.
Tonks was also killed that night.
Their sacrifice paved the way for victory, and the Marauders' final grouping occurred shortly thereafter, when Harry prepared to face Voldemort in the forest, used the Resurrection Stone.
And the echoes of James, Lily, Sirius, and Remus appeared, walking with him until the very end.
Remus's final comforting words to Harry, spoken as an echo of his true self, were about Ted. He promised, others will tell him what his mother and father died for. One day, he'll understand.
And the group promised to stay with Harry until the end, serving as the strength Harry needed for his final sacrifice.
Remus Lupin's death, however, had a lasting, profound impact on the wizarding world. He was posthumously awarded the Order of Merlin, First Class.
The highest honor the wizarding world offers, usually reserved for extraordinary magical achievement or combat. The significance here is enormous.
This wasn't just a certificate of bravery. He was the first known werewolf ever to receive the honor. It fundamentally challenged centuries of deeply embedded systemic prejudice, discriminatory.
The sources confirm that the example of his life and death did much to lift the stigma on werewolf, finally achieving a small measure of justice that his life had always been denied.
What a profound deep dive. We started with the story of a boy defined by a curse and his friend's flawed loyalty, and we ended with a heroic father who, through his final sacrifice, redefined the social standing.
Yeah, the story of the Marauders, the Animagus transformation, the map, the love, and the grief is inextricably tied to the cost of war and the corrosive power of fear and self-loathing.
What stands out in all these sources is how often the Marauders were defined by their flaws in life. They were bullies, they allowed suspicion to fracture their trust, Sirius and Remus suspecting each other of being the spy.
And Peter was the ultimate coward.
Right. Yet in their final moments, James and Lily's ultimate sacrifice, Sirius's willingness to die for his innocence, and Remus's repentance and final stand, they achieved pure, undeniable heroism.
Their deaths and their subsequent memory achieved what their complicated lives could not. A profound shift in societal perception regarding prejudice and the ultimate victory of selfless love.
And as we close out, let's return to the fascinating complexity of Peter Pettigrew.
Okay.
We know the Sorting Hat struggled with him, seeing that faint sliver of remorse and potential for bravery despite his overwhelming weakness.
And that sliver only surfaced when his silver hand turned on him, forcing a moment of mercy toward Harry that cost him his life. This was the only truly courageous and loyal act Peter ever performed.
This raises an important question for you, the listener, to consider. If Peter's final, fatal moment of loyalty fulfilled the Sorting Hat's initial choice, does that mean true loyalty is only measured when the cost is everything, including life itself?
That's a challenging thought about what truly defines a hero, even when as fundamentally flawed as we're.
That's it for this deep dive into the lives, loves, and legacies of the Marauders. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the lore.
We'll see you next time.